So before we get to the end, we got to choose a flight school, right? That's kind of the first step here. And choosing a flight school is pretty difficult. And the reason it's difficult is because you're going to be spending a lot of money with that flight school to get your flight training. So you have to make sure you find a flight school that fits not only your needs, but also your learning methods and also your budget. This is going to be important. Again, you're going to be spending a lot of money. The way you choose a flight schools really depend on what you want to do. Do you want to do this for fun? Do you want to become an airline pilot? So if you want to become an airline pilot, I would say consider looking at a degree program with a university. All right. Airlines are going to require a degree, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute. If you want to do this for fun, then it's going to be a lot less work in order to get to that private pilot, and then you can choose pretty much any flight schools out there. First thing, go look at your local airport and see if there is anybody out there, or if there isn't, then maybe you can drive for a few hours. I know people that have done this. Go to the closest flight school and then get their flight training done. I've also known people that move to a specific location just to get their training done. Usually younger people that are doing this and want to become a pilot are going to move to an area that has a flight school where they can basically spend their time and just focus on doing this. The other question is, how much time do you have? Are you retired and then this is what you want to do on the side for fun? Are you working full-time and you have a family and you can do this in the evenings and on the weekends? Or are you a student and you can dedicate, again, full-time doing this? So this is going to dictate how many times you fly per week. And I'm going to give you some tips in a minute on how you can save money, and the number of times you fly per week is actually a big ticket item right here. Your budget is also going to be important. How much money do you have to spend? And some flight schools are going to be more expensive. Depending on the type of airplane that they fly, then they're going to charge more money. So you have to find something that matches all of these different criteria. And remember, I said this is difficult, and this is exactly why. Now I'm going to give you an advice. I'm going to give you an advice from something that I've learned over the years. Everything in aviation is more expensive than expected, and it takes a lot longer than expected. And you're going to laugh at this, but you'll see when you start flight training, you're going to say, I can get this done in 3 weeks. Well, you can't because everything in aviation, it takes longer than expected. And you're going to say, well, I'm going to budget $5,000 for this thing because that's what the flight school told me. Well, guess what? It's not going to cost $5,000. All right. I'm going to get back to this, but as you start going through your flight training, just remember that there's going to be a lot of unknowns, and every unknown is going to add more cost and more time to your certification. So just be ready. Expectations, okay? You know what I used to say? What I always say, I still do it. Expectations is the leading cause of disappointment. Let that sink in. Expectation is the leading cause of disappointment. I had a boss that said that all the time, and man, is that right, all right? A bunch of things that you need to know. You are going to be spending money on flight training, but not only that, you're also going to be spending money on different accessories. You're going to have to get a headset. You're going to have to get something to sump the fuel. You're going to have to get a flashlight, a bag, logbook, a medical certificate. You're going to have to get a flight computer, we call it, maybe an iPad. It's going to be adding up. So make sure that you are aware of this, because not all the flight schools are going to tell you everything you need, which is really sad, but that's what happens. This is the real world. Also, know that you are going to be charged for briefings. When you get to the airport and you spend time with your instructor on the ground before the flight and after the flight, you are going to pay for this. In most cases, it's going to be about 30 minutes total time added to your bill. So you have to remember that this is not free. This is not included in the training. Also remember, because I was one before, instructors are paid hourly. If instructors don't fly, if you show up late, if you don't show up, then the instructor does not get paid, which is not cool. A lot of these guys out there, fly instructing is a difficult job. I will say it. Fly instructing is very difficult. The hours are difficult. Being in the airplane all the time is very tiring. It is a lot of work. So please be mindful with your fly instructor. And again, if you don't show up on time, they don't get paid. They only get paid for the time that they spend with a student that is billed to a student. So keep that in mind. I want to talk about flight hours, because I think this is where a lot of flight schools make big mistakes when they talk to customers, because they're not being transparent. And I want to be transparent, because I want you to go out there and I want you to be successful. So in order to get your private pilot certificate, you need to have a certain number of hours. We've talked about those already: 40 hours of total time, 20 hours of dual, 10 hours of solo time by yourself. Some flight schools are going to use these minimum number of hours to create a quote for you. Well, the reality is 40 hours is the bare minimum. You know how many people I've seen in the last 20 years in flight training that have finished within 40 hours? They fit on one hand, okay? They fit on one hand. Very, very few people will finish in 40 hours. The national average is about 60 to 75 hours total. If you go to a flight school and that flight school tells you that it's going to take 40 hours to do the training and this is how much it's going to cost, then your next question needs to be, what is the average and how much is it going to cost me based on these averages? And the flight school is going to look at you and be like, either they're going to say, we don't know, in which case you walk away because they don't know what they're doing, or they're going to say, well, here's the average and here's how much it's actually going to cost with averages. Flight schools do this because they don't want to scare away the customer. They don't want you to be scared when you see a bill that's going to be a lot more than the competitor, because all the flight schools do the same thing. All the flight schools are going to give you the bare minimum because they want to look competitive. The problem is, if you say it's going to cost $3,000 or $4,000, and in reality it costs $7,000 or $8,000 or $9,000 or $10,000, then you lost the customer anyway, and you lost somebody that's never going to be flying again. So I was always against this. When I managed flight schools, we always quoted based on averages and never based on minimums. We were never the most competitive out there, but we were the most realistic. And this is what's important. Find a school that's realistic, not the cheapest flight school. So you may say, what are the averages? Well, it's actually very difficult to find information. And if you look, there's one document out there that's the data is hidden in an FAA document. And the FAA says it's 60 to 75 hours on average for private pilots. There's no real empirical data available out there. I can tell you from experience, because I've been doing this for a long time, I can tell you that these numbers are pretty close. 60 to 75 hours is going to be an average that you should count on.